Ryan Patel. He is a senior fellow with the Drucker School of Management at Claremont Graduate University. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, first of all, let's talk about President Xi's address at the BRICS Business Forum. He's kicking off the summit, of course, as host. He was very critical of the West's sanctions against Russia, saying they hurt the global economy overall. Can you talk about this tone and the overall message President Xi is sending here, and how much is this Ukraine conflict factoring into this meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's clear President Xi Jinping has really made it consistent when it comes to what their feeling is on the sanctions, and obviously China believes and continues to push on how it impacts the rest of the global economy, specifically on the sanctions on Russia as well. And so for me, this was a message that was going to be loud, and obviously it was, and it was going to be specifically for Russia in this BRICS summit to be able to kick off the conversations and ensuring that this prolonged war is going to lead into a lot of different casualties behind it.
Ryan, let's talk about the theme this year. It is specifically, I'm quoting, foster high-quality BRICS partnership, usher in a new era for global development. Now, in layman's terms, can you break that down for us? What does this mean, and what new era does the group want to usher in?
Yeah, when you think of global development, you think of how there is all these interconnected economies. And when you think about the BRICS countries and BRICS Summit, when it started a decade plus ago, it was to take the middle income, up and rising income countries to kind of grow together and further develop not just themselves, but I think the idea was also to develop other countries that were in the lower income areas to be able to develop globally when you have a global, quotation, global development, stronger together, infrastructures together. And that's kind of where you've seen a lot of the investments being made, even with South Africa. China's made a lot of investments in there, as well as India into Africa as well. And so that is the idea or premise, what I believe the premise is of these countries coming together and to develop further together.
And are we expecting anything big to come out of this summit, do you think, Ryan?
Well, it's interesting. I think the backdrop of the Ukraine crisis is also at the forefront. I think if there was no crisis, I think the idea what would come forward is where have they gone from last year to now? What partnerships that China and India has further along, if it was in other countries as well. So truthfully, I'd like to see what has occurred, but obviously with the pandemic, I think it's more about recovery mode versus what has been laid out further to execute on. So that'll be interesting to see what comes out of there.
I want to talk about the group itself. Beijing has indicated it wants to expand this 5-member group. And so what do you expect on that front? And what would be the significance of expanding the group?
Yeah, I think the reason why I think it would expand it is, part one is to have some more credibility, have other countries come to be a part of it. Part two is to further mission, the strength of the group. But really at the end of the day, I think it's also uncomfortable conversation because you have India, you have China, you have Russia. What other countries can you add to appease all three groups, don't forget Brazil and South Africa, that wouldn't also make it still feel balanced? So I think that is interesting to see who the right partner would be, the right country that would add equal value to all, or maybe it's multiple countries. So that'll be very interesting to see what that country would be. But I can see why I would want to expand is because you kind of want to continue to grow, and that kind of makes sense, but being the right partner country will be important to pick.
Yeah, it's a really complex issue. I want to talk also about BRICS taking place just a few days before the big G7 summit, with some countries implementing the exact sanctions that President Xi was referring to. So how much of a contrast do both of these gatherings represent in terms of these increasingly divergent ideologies among these different countries?
Well, I can tell you this, both sides, both summits can say whatever ideology that they want, but at the end of the day, everyone's going to have to come together. So it's I understand and I respect that everyone is stating what they are trying to do, but there's going to have to be some kind of bridge to make this solved, to make sure that the global development for all countries are moving forward. So I think we're seeing rhetoric. The question now will be, what is the bridges that are being mended to ensure that the execution of that for all parties are going to be moving forward. So to me, that all eyes are going to be watching on the summit and also the G7.